Hello there. Welcome to this rabbit hole episode. We haven't had one for a while,
It's been a minute for sure.
except for the one you guys had last week with Musoni.
It was fun.
We had a great time.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one big rabbit hole. But if you were watching this week's episode, you'd have noticed that these gentlemen had very strong views about what needs to be done in the next 5 years. Tinashe is of the view that without fundamentally restructuring the government and how it operates, we're not going to make much headway. Whereas Rufaro thinks the ball really is in the courts of those that have vested interests in how policy is made and implemented. So we're going to let them have a go at each other and see if they can
Yeah.
influence
So
our thoughts.
before you cut me off in the main episode, I was explaining how.
Can you begin by making your argument?
I was explaining how if you look at the Chinese story, right? Deng, who's considered the father of modern China, is actually a contemporary of Mao and was there for most of the significant events in Mao's career, right? As Mao built the Chinese Communist Party and the bureaucracy that supported it, Deng was a senior leader in that organization, and he was there for decades before he actually took over after Mao's death, right? So he inherited this bureaucracy with this particular way of doing business and looking at the world. But in his time in exile during the Cultural Revolution, he had an opportunity to reflect, to read a lot, think about things differently. So when he came back into power to run the party and the country, he had a different vision, and he was able to execute that vision.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you and ask you to come back.
So when you
Sorry,
look at this,
Rufaro, hang
yeah,
on.
yeah,
Can you come back and actually just frame your argument first? Because you're illustrating it, but can you actually say what your point is?
So my point is not that you need to get rid of everybody in the bureaucracy with a certain mindset. You can actually work with the bureaucracy that's there, right? But what you need to do is to have leaderships that's able to come in and inspire a different vision, which is what I believe Deng did. He didn't fire the entire bureaucracy, right? He came in and said, look, guys, you know what? The way we've been doing things hasn't produced the outcomes that we want.
And what's your argument?
Okay, my argument is that strategy is about structure and processes. And
You've been listening to me. Well done, my son.
Well, it is true that you could change the individuals. That's just the first step. Because the second step is you need to change the actual structure of the bureaucracy. So for a very good example is budgetary process. So a budgetary process under a communist government is fundamentally different from a budgetary process under a free market government. Would you agree with that?
You're still framing your
Okay,
argument.
Sorry?
You're still framing your
Oh,
argument.
okay.
We're just
All
we're gonna
Okay, so-
we're gonna come
so-
along for the ride, even if
so-
we don't agree with you.
Okay, fantastic. So what I'm trying to say is under a communist government, how we allocate resources is more fundamental, and how we distribute income or any income whatsoever is more fundamental to a communist government. Whereas with the free market government, it's more fundamental to create the income, right? So when you look at a budgetary process under a free market structure, it would be a lot of your resources are going to income generating, supply side economics, so to speak. And you have a different kind of people, you have different kind of budgetary process, because then your budget master is looking at, okay, what's our return?
So I'm still
What's the
trying to
return?
follow. What's your argument? Because he's saying you need.
My argument is you can change the people at the top. Sure, that's just one step. But actually, the more fundamental, if you're changing strategy, is to change the structure of the bureaucracy.
Are you
Because
making the case that Deng changed the structure?
Well, first
Deng
it
is
says-
your example.
Yes, that's my example.
Yeah, no. First of all, I wanted to frame the argument. And I'm actually saying, yes, he did. Because if you fundamentally think about it, after the Cultural Revolution and everything that
Mao did.
had done, what Deng fundamentally did in 1979 was to change the bureaucracy, to make it an economic, incentivized bureaucracy. And that's how they started creating special economic zones. Those were not there before. And to ensure that the bureaucracy was at the mercy of the markets. In fact, that's the fundamental truth that's different between China and, for example, us and everyone else, is that China is very clear about their political ideology, but they're also very clear about how a bureaucracy must be economic incentivized. And that's the difference between Mao and Deng. That Deng actually changed the bureaucracy. And you can go into history from 1979 right through the 80s. All he fundamentally
Did he change the
was to
individuals
change
or did he change the process?
the process, the structure and the process. And effectively, you then change. When you do that, you effectively change the people because those people are going to be found inadequate. And there's something that happened after the Chinese Communist Party Congress, right? Everybody on Twitter or everywhere were talking about how the people in the Politburo, Chinese Politburo, were engineers, right? Where are those engineers coming from?
Don't they have lawyers in China?
Well, the current leader of China has got a
Economic
doctorate in law.
incentive.
She's actually a lawyer.
So an interesting bit is if you look at the careers of these people 30 years ago, the period that you're talking about, 40 years ago, these were the same people who then now occupied positions in the bureaucracy that was purely economics. It was driven by economics. And how you ranked higher in the bureaucracy or how you moved in the bureaucracy was purely defined by economic progress. It wasn't defined by political progress.
Okay.
Okay, so I hear you, but my question then is, so why didn't that happen in November 2017? Because just like the current president had been part of senior leadership in government and the party for the last 40 years, so had Deng
50.
been part of senior leadership in government and the party for 40, 50 years.
That's a
so
very good question.
so why? And he
I can
clearly
give you an answer.
articulated his vision to move the country in a more free market capitalist direction. So why was he not able to actually make it happen?
Okay, I can give you it's a very good question, and I can give you an answer on two levels. The first thing is, it's a misnomer to compare a coup government with Deng's government. It's a misnomer. That's not where we should derive an example from. And
Why
the
not?
second thing, because the structure of a coup government is fundamentally different from the structure of a competitive political contestation. So Deng is a result of a political contestation that was actually happening within the Chinese Communist Party. He was actually, from a meritocratic perspective, he was actually the man for the job. If you think about
Okay, I'll
it.
push
And
back
he had,
on that,
he'd
but
actually
I-
gone through, which is fundamentally different from a coup government, because a coup government is, you don't succeed in a coup because of your economic policy.
Well, actually, I'll push back on
succeed.
that premise before you go further.
But
No,
you can't ask a question and then
No.
interrupt me.
You're making an assertion that I think is fundamentally
But
problematic.
whether
okay.
that's true or not,
Okay,
all
carry
you've
on.
just done is,
Okay, carry on.
yeah, I mean, come on.
Now you've
come
lost
on.
your train of thought again.
Exactly.
You should have some
because
whiskey.
That's the problem. So on two levels. First of all is, I'm not saying it's impossible, but if you look at Pinochet, right, the Chilean, that was an outright
Dictator,
coup, dictator, and what he immediately did. If you look at Gaddafi, if you look at Egypt, or Sisi, there's certain fundamental truths that are necessary around a coup, and it has nothing to do with an economic agenda. Never mind your economic policy.
Okay,
is
but look,
actually
I'm
true.
going to push back there actually because
No, you can't, because this is a rabbit hole, and I have to.
No,
put
it
out my
doesn't mean you
argument.
can't go on and on and on without making a point.
But you keep on interrupting me.
Rapido is like a cage match.
Yeah, but
Didn't you ever watch WWF?
Okay, all right. I get the rules.
WWF
I'm gonna continue interrupting you guys.
But-
when
but-
you're making your
but-
argument,
no,
WWF is not real.
I'm gonna.
But no, look, when you
This
talk
is a problem with alcohol.
when you talk about all of these coup governments, and the thing that you're not actually saying that they did, and what I'm trying to understand is this what you're saying? That after all those coups, people were marched down to the beach and shot.
No, I'm not even saying that, because they're fundamentally different. You have palace coups and you have other
Bloody coups.
Bloody coups. So that's not necessarily.
So what are you
true.
saying?
I'm actually saying that when you gain the reins of power from a coup, you've done so not because of your economic agenda. You must also be very clear about it. And if you're clear about it, then you will sort of put in a government that deals with the economic agenda. And that's what Pinochet did. if you look at, I'm sure you've heard of the Chicago School of Economics, which was actually Pinochet, once he had taken over, he realized his inadequacies, right? He had a very wide understanding that he wanted economic growth, but obviously he was inadequate. He had got into that position purely because of might, right? And then immediately what he did is and this is the brilliant thing about a coup leader, is you can actually buy technocratic advice. You can buy in the technocrats.
We got
Mutuli,
we got George.
yeah, but beyond buying the
Sekai
technical,
Nzenza.
yeah, but then they're useless because the structure of government. This is
Okay, I wasn't there when he said they're useless. I wasn't there.
no, by useless I mean that they're inadequate because the structure of government is not it's not in any way amenable to economic growth. It's
No,
not.
but we brought George.
It's about
We
economic
brought
distribution.
John Becerra. We brought all these guys from the private sector.
And all they're doing is economic distribution. If you look at what Becerra is doing, he's not talking about economic growth. When you look at even our wheat and every one of our programs, it's about economic distribution. Why? Because you're coming into a straitjacket, into a position that is purely communist in nature, and its output. So if you go into a
But if you bring the Minister of Agriculture from the private sector and you bring the PEMSEC from the private sector,
whatever they say, if you think about it, his goal, the minister, the PEMSEC of Agriculture, his goal, we can admit, is how many people have you affected with your economic agenda?
I thought you actually going to make a different point, which is that perhaps in terms of from a structural perspective, one of the peculiarities of Zimbabwe is that you have, if you look at the ruling party today, they have a structure called the Politburo, and you have the government, and the personalities in positions and that oversee certain portfolios don't overlap.
don't necessarily.
Don't necessarily overlap. So the president is the same in both silos, but in a lot of the technocratic positions, they don't. So maybe the guy who is wearing the government hat doesn't have the power in the Politburo to push his agenda.
He doesn't need any power. That's the point. The point is, if you change the structure of government, by you occupying, if you're the PEMSEC of Treasury, if the structure was different, then it wouldn't be about distribution of income. It would be about economic growth. This is what China got.
No, but is that a structure issue or is it an
It's a
ideology issue?
So this is what I'm saying. It doesn't matter what the ideology is. So even if the ideology was communist, then the structure doesn't change because the structure is already communist. But if the ideology is, as the president nicely articulated, he wanted to privatize. So this is giving you an example. He wanted to privatize. He wanted to create jobs. But Becerra is not thinking about creating jobs. He's not. He's thinking about how do I distribute, I get an income, and how do I
So
distribute
it's an ideological issue. It's not a structure issue. So let's transfer this. So you pick China. I'll go to Obamanomics. He had his fantastic healthcare plan, which everybody in America thought was communist. And even though the president said, what is it called? Obamacare.
Yeah,
Even though the Affordable Care Act,
Even though the
Obamacare
president
is
said,
just a moniker in the public's imagination.
well, even though the president said, look, this is the direction we're taking, the whole bureaucracy said, no, this is communist. It smells communist, we're not doing it. And he diluted it until, does anybody even know what it is now?
No, it didn't even dilute, and you're actually making my point. And the point is, if you look at the American bureaucracy, right, the minute the president might say it, right, but it has to go into the federal states themselves, and they have to change. And if you look at, and this is where Mitt Romney got into trouble, right, because Obamacare is actually a Mitt Romney
Idea, because he was governor of Massachusetts and he implemented something similar.
And you can actually implement it at a bureaucratic, because your ideology, it doesn't matter what your ideology is, but what it means, if your government structure is appropriate, it means it can run through your ideology, and it doesn't matter. The ideology can change. That's why in America you could have a very left president like Biden, and a very right president like
He's got a very
Trump.
He's got a very entrepreneurial perspective.
No, it's actually it's Max Weber. This is structure.
But
this is process.
But you actually believe it. Why I'm saying,
which I'm not sure is true in Zimbabwe. What Obama said about the U.S. government is that it's like a big ship like the Titanic. So however you as the guy in charge animated about certain policies or ideas, it's not going to happen overnight because it's like turning the Titanic.
In America, you get to fire the bureaucracy. You actually get in.
And yet Obama still couldn't make changes happen.
No, he did. He made
But not
the
all
most fundamental.
But not all the ones he wanted.
because you couldn't get the political will. Because you need the political will. But once you have the political will, you can actually fire
But you know what?
the bureaucracy.
Because you come from a perspective of you control your destiny. I've run a bureaucracy, and you can change the structure, you can change the people. But if there's an ideology, you know what? There is a security guard. You can change everybody, and everybody can be thinking this particular way, but there's a security guard who just refuses to open the gate for your most valuable customer. And it doesn't matter because you haven't changed the way of thinking.
Remember what I said? I said the way you're thinking is probably the first stage. And we had a president who said, I want to privatize.
Sorry, apparently we're primitive.
Yeah, you are very primitive. You had a president who said, I wanted to privatize. And I'm trying to tell you why what he said did not translate. And to give you a business, and you're saying you run a bureaucracy, let me give you a very classic example in a business, is a bank opening hours, right? If you think about it. So it could be ideological. You say, okay, we're going to start opening on a Sunday. So that's
No,
ideological.
the ideology is actually we're going to serve our customers.
Yeah.
We're gonna make our customers happy.
I like your example.
Yeah. So we're gonna make our customers happy, and our customers want us to open on a Sunday and opening hours early morning from whatever, right? So we've identified that's the strategy, and those are the tactics. We're actually going to start opening at 7, and we're going to close at 7 p.m. and we're going to open on a Saturday throughout the day, and Sunday we agree from a strategy perspective, and we all go home. Now, if the structure of your employee contracts are not changed, then it's almost impossible.
Agreed.
If the structure of your banking hall is not changed and is not amenable, if the channels are not amenable, it's no matter what you have said, it's actually literally impossible for you to implement that strategy.
Completely agreed.
Right?
But
no, I haven't even finished.
No, but we're not finishing. We're in a cage match.
No.
But on the other hand, you can change the contracts. You can do all these things. If the bank teller believes in her head in a 40-hour working week that ends at 5 o'clock on a Friday, she's not going to show up on Saturday. She's going to find a loophole in her contract. She's going to call in sick. She's going to have the doctor's note that she needs. So
this is exactly
and
what I
yet
said.
the reverse is true. That she, even without changing the contract, without changing the structure, if she buys the ideology, she'll be there.
So if she's young, maybe she might buy the ideology. But if she's been in the same position for the last 40 years,
This guy's ageist.
if she's been in the position for the last 40 years, do you know what you do? She goes home, right? And you get a young guy.
This guy's going to get us in serious trouble.
She has to go home. She has to go home. She's got a farm, right? That's why she can't come on a Sunday. That's fundamental, right?
But
you've got a good strategy. But the reason why she can't come on a Sunday is because actually that's when she's doing her farming activities. So let's allow her to do her farming activities on a Sunday, and let's get a new guy.
But if you
fresh mint from university.
If you review the last 5 years, I don't think one of the criticisms that you could level at the Second Republic is that they struggle firing people that they have issues with.
Who's been fired?
Oh,
No, name one.
Or retired.
Name one.
many people.
No, give us a name.
I can't.
One. Not 5. 1.
No, many people have been fired.
No,
I can't
name
think
one.
of a name offhand.
That
In
you
fact,
cannot.
no, actually, we used to have 2 vice presidents. One of them was forced to resign.
Those are political appointments.
No, but this
No,
is my
don't
point.
change
This is my
the
point.
bureaucracy.
Did we replace him?
No,
Why?
I don't know.
Because he's still there.
No, not in government.
But anyway, that's besides the point. The point I'm trying to
My
make.
point is.
The point I'm
I
trying to
don't
make-
think that the Second Republic has issues firing people.
No, it's actually very difficult.
Nobody's been
You're
fired.
right, but it's very
No,
difficult.
people have been
Who?
fired.
Okay, so in a bureaucracy, in a communist bureaucracy, it's almost impossible to fire somebody And when they do, it's big news. So they have.
Have you studied communist bureaucracy?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
People not only get fired.
No, they
Okay,
get
what's
switched. They get
Okay,
moved.
did you see what happened this week? Sorry.
The OPC, you remember the PEMSEC of Ministry of Health, right? Makomva.
Makomva, yeah.
Yeah, Makomva. All she did is she was just moved from
To COVID.
to COVID within the OPC. And this is the fundamental problem I'm trying to
And
say.
what happened this week when they said, so the past few weeks, they've been saying, nobody gets a bonus unless your performance review shows that you've been working. It's going to be performance-related bonuses. What happened this week?
That's dramatic.
What happened this week?
They don't even have performance development.
And then this week they said, oh, no, sorry, we didn't mean that. We just said only for the really senior.
No, you know what?
Because the structure is very communistic. And going back to China actually changed this structure. Because now they were exporting it to the US. They could not export to the US if the structure was not changed. And that's why they then introduced economic...
Where I disagree with you
economic-
was the thinking. So one
I agree.
of the famous
I agree.
Chinese companies that led the export drive is a company called Haier, which makes air conditioners and fridges.
Mm-hmm.
And what made Haier change its quality was they actually started embarrassing employees who produce poor quality goods. First thing they did is they made low earning employees destroy poor quality goods. So on every Monday or Tuesday, whatever day it was, everybody had to line up. And if you built a poor quality fridge, you were given a hammer and you had to destroy it in front of everyone. And this was like a year's salary for everyone. So that changed the thinking. And if you'd done something dumb, they had stuffed pigs, like teddy bear pigs, that you put on your head and you stood in a special square.
Yeah.
And the whole company looked at you with a pig on your head.
Do you know what the fundamental within government? Do you know what the truth that you're speaking to is exactly what I'm trying to talk about? Is it meant you couldn't complain to the Chinese Communist Party, because before you could. So under Mao, you could literally go and complain and say,
Do you know the history
what?
of the Cultural
This is what's
Revolution?
actually happening in our company, and the CEO could be fired. Right? And then now under Deng, he's like, no. That's not going to happen. That's fundamental structural changes. Those are the ones that I'm talking about. That yes, ideology is very important. And that has allowed, if you look at the Second Republic, ideologically, I'm actually saying that they've changed from Mugabe.
In an
Ideologically.
important and positive way.
In an important and positive way. But what they have not done is to change the structure of government. And what I was asking for is, in the next 5 years, they need to change the structure of government. And to me, the easiest thing to do is to put a prime minister. Then you can appoint
we're
a
back
prime
at this.
minister. Well, fundamentally, then you can change, the prime minister will come in and change the structure of government, will change the processes of our bureaucracy, because the ideology has changed somewhat. And then we'll start to see change, I think.
I think,
And if they
I
get
think
it
if you
wrong,
I think
then
if you
you
change
just fire one person.
if you change the thinking first,
Which is what I think business should do.
the
we
structure
have a
will follow and might not
obligation-
even be necessary.
Because
Then you're being extremely naive. And for a strategist, I am a
But okay,
little disappointment.
So help
Okay,
me,
so
help
I'm
me,
disappointed.
help me cope with my naivety.
And I'm
right?
being sarcastic.
Help me
when I
cope
say
with my
little.
help me cope with my naivety, because I think, and it's been clear in my mind for the longest time, right, that an economy that is growing and thriving, in which people are feeling fulfilled and are excited about the future, is in the best interest of any government in power. The politicians in power are better off.
Not necessarily. Political power is an end in itself.
But you get more political power if people are happy.
No, you don't actually. Otherwise, we wouldn't have poor countries where, and
No, but isn't that just
But
an
that's the
error
point.
in thinking?
No, it's not even an error in thinking. This is politics 101, Machiavelli politics.
Yeah, so this
101.
is the case that I want to make. That's
But
okay.
you're not.
There's a
taking the
worldview.
argument.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. There's a worldview that says
Political power is an end.
from
in
a
itself.
a tyrant's perspective that I'm in charge. I don't have to change any policy unless I want to. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But the reality of being in charge is that there are processes and costs involved in maintaining your position in power. And I will make the case that no matter what your structure of government is, it's easier to hold power if the masses are happy and optimistic about the future.
No, if you're a student of politics, you know that actually is not true, unless you're a republic.
Well, North Korea kind of contradicts that narrative.
It's actually most of the world contradicts that.
Most of the world? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, okay, I won't pick
Most of the
I
world
won't
is
pick most of the
illiberal.
world. But
Most of the world
illiberal is not a
is
word. We've told you this before.
No,
No, it is actually a word.
It is a word, and it's a word that he understands. And you get what I'm saying? That most of the world is not liberal at all. Most of the world is not democratic at all. Most of Africa is not democratic at all. But yet you have people who wield so much power. So, and this is the point I'm trying to actually.
No.
This is the point I'm actually trying to make.
But Tinashe, in fairness, most of the countries that you're citing but not saying but not citing, whichever way it is.
Simba is had two glasses.
The economies are doing well. So the people are happy and optimistic.
No, they're not. Otherwise, poverty would not be increasing in Africa. But to your point, there are certain countries. So Egypt is a very good example, right? Where 2013 there is actually a coup, and they've sustained that government for a very long time, and there's somewhat an economic growth. Is because it is very possible. That's the argument I was trying to make. That even with a coup, it's very possible to pivot and understand that you got this power not because of your economic agenda. You got this power purely because of strength of might. And what you need to do to actually get
It's
economic
only
growth,
legitimacy.
not legitimacy. You've got the legitimacy. The legitimacy is there once you're in that office. But what you want is you actually want economic growth, and the economic growth can come through when you change the structure of government, when you actually have a prime minister whose sole role is to run government.
So we're agreeing on everything else, except you saying that you must have the prime minister. We all agree that if people have more money in their pockets, Mark Steves, a common friend of ours, always says it's about food in bellies and shoes on feet. If people's kids have food in their bellies and shoes on their feet, everybody's happy. But you're saying this depends on you changing the structure of government.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I'm saying I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah,
I think ideology comes first. I'm actually not sure what Rufaro is saying.
No, I'm saying that if you are a tyrant,
change mindsets and then everything changes.
Oh, so
no, hypothetically,
Yeah. And I'm saying that's
no.
not true.
No. What I'm saying is
That's actually
hypothetically,
not true.
like I think even the guy,
It's contrary to strategy 101.
even the guy in North Korea, right? If
That's
he
a
was,
very good example.
if
If
he
you were
was,
to change it,
no. Can I
and we
make my
put
point?
a South,
Can I make my point?
and we put the prime minister or the
you're
president.
in a cage match, so you got to.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna push back.
And we put the prime minister of South Korea, and we say you're now the president of North Korea. Do you think North Korea will change?
No,
Why not?
No.
because the
You have
mindsets
to-
haven't changed.
Yeah,
You
no.
have to
And then
get the
he
buy-in
goes
of
on
the
a
guy running-
decade. He goes for a decade where he's making speeches and he's telling everybody.
so
you
let
need
me
to
make
change
my
your
point about
mindset.
the guy in North Korea.
You need to change your mindset.
So let's go back to your coup example, and I have a feeling we're going to get into trouble for these examples. But okay, so in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, Nigeria had a series of coups. Ghana had one. Key difference is, which you will say plays into your argument, but I don't think it does. What Jerry Rawlings did,
What are you deciding that it plays into my argument?
because you said there was a change of people, what Jerry Rawlings did is he
He had people shot on the beach.
He took
yes.
all the old guys onto the beach, shot them, and then got a bunch of new guys. He said, guys, this is how things run from now on. But I don't think it was the idea that the guys got shot. It was the idea that everybody knew that this is the way things
maybe
run.
you're actually ignorant of the
No, but I want-
trajectory, the Ghana trajectory. That even after the coup, the economy did not change. In
it
fact,
didn't.
it was disastrous.
No, it didn't.
It was disastrous right until.
But they didn't have any more coups.
Yeah, no. But I'm not
The
saying.
people, okay?
I'm not saying that you can prevent coups. Remember, in the theory or in the literature around coups, there are three types of coups. So there's a successful coup, there's an abortive coup, and there's a coup plot. So all this play into the theory around coups. But all I'm saying is, up until and they wanted to change, they fired people, but they could not change the
They
bureaucracy. They literally killed people, but they could not change the bureaucracy. And for another 30 years, Ghana was in the doldrums. Similarly with a country where they had successive changes in coup, but the bureaucracy was still the same and they were in the doldrums. Everything changed in Ghana, everything changed in Nigeria when they started changing the bureaucracy. Now, we're all fans of Lee Kuan Yew. What did Lee Kuan Yew do when he took over the reins?
No, he's an unfair example. He had a brand new
It's
country.
about the bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy plays into what you're actually saying, but the bureaucracy could fight against you. That's why I use the example of Yes Minister, that actually the bureaucracy has its own ideas. And this is what's dangerous, even when you look at South Africa. Why South Africa is in the doldrums at the present moment is this cadre deployments, that you have these cadres who are political appointees who are running parastatals, who are running, state-owned enterprises.
Closing
It's
remarks.
impossible.
Yeah, so I agree with most of what you've said, right? But the point I want to make is, if you look at the most extreme example that you've used, which is North Korea, right? And if you were looking at Kim's dashboard in terms of his risks, the reasons why he might
Okay. Carry on quickly.
the reason why you might wake up and not be in power, right? I suspect that one of the reasons is the deprivation of his citizens. And I think that he would be better off.
Do you agree? 'Cause I
We're
totally disagree.
we're trying to close the show.
Okay, I totally disagree.
these are closing remarks.
When he looks at his dashboard, his risk dashboard,
Yeah.
what he's more worried about
It's an American invasion.
more South Korea.
South Korea.
Okay. As you can see,
more worried about, not his people.
as you can see, this has completely gone south, but it's a rabbit hole episode. It's been a steel cage match. Even sometimes,
good fun.
sometimes the ref takes off his shirt and jumps in. But hopefully we've inspired some thoughts. And we'd certainly like to hear your thoughts on the discussion on our social media platforms. And let's see if we can keep it going throughout the week. And maybe some fantastic ideas come out of this. And we will inspire those that lead us, those that make policies for us, to make this a better Zimbabwe for you and I. Have a great week. Stay safe. Be good. If you can't be good at it.